Charles, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Let's charge it up.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Whew, that's going right for the jugular. Well, the first thing that I would say, let's see, as a kid, as a young kid, preteen, I wanted to be a priest.
Hmm.
And then later, I wanted to be a stockbroker.
Well, tell me about so I'd asked you this question before, and I thought you were the second person now that I think about it. What was it about being a priest, do you think, that attracted you?
Yeah, that's that's a good question. We are a Mexican, Italian, and Irish ethnicity family.
Hmm.
And I grew up mainly around the Mexican side of the family. Because that was the case, and because we were in Mexico a lot, and I did live in Mexico, and they were all about faith, and religion was a very big piece of who they were.
Hmm.
So I found myself traveling to a bunch of little cities in Mexico that were with really beautiful ornate churches and things that
Hmm.
I love the churches. And, I just got into, it was something that was instilled in me young, about praying. And then I thought I just had a very strong connection with God. Let's put it that way. So I thought, oh, I want to go out and save the world, and I want to be a priest. And then, fast forward 92 jobs later and about 50 years, here I am, a chef, food and beverage entrepreneur, a digital content creator, and a person who still wants to save the world.
That's beautiful, Charles. Well, so that is that the connection, do you think, to that between the priest dream and then what you do today?
Maybe. I think that, we have certain things that are inherently part of our DNA,
Hmm.
one capacity. And I never really put those two together, to be honest with you. But I do believe that as we're on this planet, we should have a purpose. I
Mm,
think a lot of people never figure out what that is. Some people figure out what it is early on. And some people, it's a longer journey, but, they kind of figure out some pieces to it. And that's something that for me and for my DNA and for who I am, that's extremely important, just to go out there and try to help the world just kind of function in a better place, especially where we're at right now as humanity is positioned right now.
so is that what your purpose is, do you think?
I think it's a facet of it for sure.
Mm,
I could definitely say that I'm working on a docuseries called hashtag Chef on Tour. It's about gastronomy, it's about lifestyle, it's about travel. But I think beyond all of that, it's about stories, it's about people, it's about what connects us. Food connects us, breaking bread connects us, taking that to the next level and then to the next level. And I always tell people, if I could save the world, I would, but I'm just one person. But the interesting thing about it is we highlight a nonprofit slash foundation slash potentially a group that's doing really amazing things in their communities in different parts of the world. And we'd love to
mm,
drive visibility and engagement to what they're doing. And that's something that always kind of resonates with me. Of course, there are a lot of great, like call them, storytellers or ambassadors of what they do. And it's also about finding those people that are not just that, but that are so much more
mm,
multi-dimensional, not one dimensional. And
mm.
one piece of that for me is, that energy component. And when that energy component is aligned, or that vibration component is aligned, I just feel that, it's something magical.
And I can hear your passion too as you're talking about all of that. The food, the connection, the people piece, the telling the stories, and then that highlighting something good through these nonprofits. Like you said, multifaceted. You are doing various good things through just that docuseries, highlighting new cultures, educating people about food. There's multiple components there.
Yeah, getting people excited about it it's
Mm,
extremely important. I think that there's certainly enough of competition in the world, and there's certainly enough of competition shows. And what we try to do is bring the real vibe and energy of a city
mm,
through these, storytellers And through their, of course, their energies and what that
Yeah.
looks like. And of course, everybody has a story, and a lot of stories are, jumping through hoops and fire pits and all of the crying and the laughing and the blood, sweat, tears, as they say. And,
Mm.
really understanding how we can use that as inspiration as well to help us go to wherever it is that we are trying to go to.
Mm. Well, I'd love to go back a little bit to rewind to the start of your story. You said you wanted to become a priest, and then also that you grew up in Mexico. I find that so fascinating. So, do you mind sharing your story? What brought you to Mexico? How did that shape you into who you are today? And you mentioned stockbroker, priest, Mexico, stockbroker. Those are all seem so just different. And I think our listeners are just going to find it so fascinating.
I mean, it wasn't by choice. I was born in Chicago, and 3 years later, they took me to San Antonio, Texas. That's really where I grew up. It was almost the midway point between Chicago, San Antonio, and then, of course, the part of Mexico where my family is from, which is the state of Guanajuato. Irapuato is really where it's at. And so, along that trajectory, there were a lot of things that happened. We visited Mexico a bit. Family would always come up. There was a time that there was a breakup in between my mom and my dad, and my mom sent me with my family in Mexico, and so I spent some time definitely in Irapuato, and then all of those things are, they kind of play on who we are as a person. And so I was very fortunate to have experienced that, and then to, as I grew and grew into that whole, I thought I wanted to be a priest, and I was always, creative. I was always drawing. I guess like the symbols that I was drawing, and the Roman Catholic, there's a lot of different saints and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I just gravitated towards that. They have a different saint for, a different situation. And that was that. And then, as time went on with life and I started to grow, and a lot of things started to change along the way. And my focus was I wanted to move to New York, and I wanted to go work on Wall Street. That was
Mm.
something I'm really excited about. As you know, I cook and I'm a chef and so many other things. But along the way, just so you know, I've had 92 jobs in my life. But
Wow.
along the way, everything was a building block to get to the
Mm.
next. I mean, I am as a journeyman as they come. I mean, I had two elementary, one middle, three high schools. There was a city college, a community college, another community college, a university, and then finally a degree. And then after that, I eventually really honed in on getting myself to New York. I went to school at a place called European School of Economics in Rome. And then I came back to the States and ended up moving to New York. And I achieved my dream of working on Wall Street with a group called Oppenheimer, which merged with the CIBC, which is a Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. I went on the sales side with a gentleman who brought me under his wing, but was also in a transition with what he was doing. He was becoming, instead of one of the biggest account openers on Wall Street, Lee Gleeman, he now was moving his business to asset management. And then along the way, I was trying to figure out where my position needed to be. So I had made it there, but I just wasn't excelling the way that I had
Mm.
hoped.
Mm.
It was weird because I was in the largest, well, like not the largest, but arguably one of the largest cities in the world. And I just felt very alone. I was working a
Mm.
lot of hours. I was kind of being spread very thin. And at the end of the day, a lot of things happened, including seeing the towers fall on Prince and Wooster, which is in SoHo, about 24 blocks on a straightaway, and watching everything happen on a corner for
Wow.
hours. And then that really was also another point that changed my life. I decided when I walked back home to that time, my apartment was on Houston and Avenue A. It was in the East Village. And on that walk home, I just thought that, life can change in a blink of an eye. And it changed for a lot of people all around the world
Wow.
that day. And certainly I felt that I needed to it just kind of came to me. I just felt like I needed to go back and do things that I was just so more passionate about in a
Mm.
different way. They're very different, right? Even though it's very analytical, the numbers and all of that, it's a lot of relationship building,
Mm.
to do that whole piece. But then yet when you're coming from food and beverage, there's a lot of creativity there. So, I kind of delineated that line in the sand, and then it didn't take me long to figure out I was going to stay in food and beverage.
Wow. That made me think of a question we ask clients. I ask clients is like, what events in your life made you who you are? What were the formative events? And it sounds like that was one of them.
Yeah, that was one. I mean, there were a lot of little ones, the little and mid-sized ones that lead up to, but that day is
Mm,
something that, I mean, it's no matter where I'm at in the world, and I'll say that somebody will stop, they'll start telling their story about where
mm,
they were at. They know it. And it's like we're in a
yeah.
deep conversation about something else that might have just ran across my lips.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they just stop and oh my, that day. And will never forget that. And we were in class. And so that was a pivotal moment for many people. I
Yeah.
don't know how many people actually pivoted, but I
Yeah.
certainly pivoted.
Yeah.
And, and I just let things happen the way that they should.
Yeah. You said earlier that all of these jobs, those 92 jobs, were building blocks for what you do today. I want to highlight what you said earlier. You said the relationship building is a component that you still use today, right? So even though it's technical, or it was very technical what you were doing, the relationship building was a common thing. I really believe that, like, when I think about my pivot in my career and when I think about others, it may not make sense at first glance for me, accounting, now coaching. I wouldn't be able to work with my clients the way I do without that experience.
Right. I mean, I was very fortunate to have great people around me. I think that that's an interesting piece. And that's something, it's really interesting, but I believe, my energy had people gravitate towards me or I gravitated towards them. I always say there's two types of people that for some reason gravitate towards me. And they could be very out there or strange, but not in a way that they would harm anyone. I mean, like you could see somebody, I could be at a bar and I could see somebody walk in and I'm like, that person is going to want to talk to me. I don't know why. And I'll go and walk to the other side of the room and get on my phone and just, like call somebody just for the heck of it. And they would come over and tap me on the shoulder and say, excuse me, do you know where the bathrooms are at? Yeah, they're right here. Really love your shirt. It happened, and it happened just the other day flying back from Mexico City. Somebody sat across the aisle from me, and boy, that turned into almost a 2-hour conversation.
Mm,
So, all of those pieces kind of, roll back in. And then, the relationship part for what we do and how we try to build that global community and what that's about, finding those right energies. Another little anecdote, friend from Chicago, from Argentina, goes to Sicily and decides that she's going to go to a concert in Ibiza. And so she's asking me some questions. Where should I do? What should I stay? And I just said, well, let me see. And so I reached out to a friend of mine in Ibiza and she's like, really? What time should I pick her up? So never asked for anything, but
yeah.
that's the type of relationship. She treated that person as if
Mm,
it was. So if
mm,
we learn to do that and treat even our like that third party, that person
mm,
coming our way, we're like, I'm going to treat them like, Lupe,
mm,
or I'm going to treat them like Charles would or whatever. And it's something that's extremely important because it's work.
mm,
And work doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It
mm,
means that it's a good thing. So
mm.
that's the same thing when you get into a relationship or you start a job or anything that, and you think, oh, it's good. We're good. And it's like, no, you are good, but you're constantly working at it. You're
Yeah.
constantly trying to improve it and make it better. And that's the thing that's extremely important with relationships. Now, as we see with social media and how that's taken effect, sometimes for the positive, I built a lot of great new relationships from a distance as people, gravitate towards my Instagram and they will reach out to me on a DM and talk to me and what
Yeah.
about this or what about that or we're going here, we're doing that, and we kind of build those relationships along the way. And then there's also different other aspects of that. How it's not as positive is I've taken a lot of my really really good friends off of social media like Facebook and stuff like that, and
Mm,
they were offended. And they said, they didn't understand, and of course I didn't give them any context, but the point is that we used to have a beer, once every few weeks. And now we see each other once every few months. And when we do, or when we did, it was kind of like they knew my whole story and I knew, their whole story, and it didn't have
Mm,
that spark anymore. So I said,
interesting.
what we need to do is we need to live in more in the moment and not forget those opportunities and those relationships that we built.
Yeah, sometimes social media is a way of connecting, but sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking that just by scrolling, just by observing, that we're actually connecting.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed too is if I'm getting on my phone, what am I really looking for? Am I really looking for connection? And so instead of just scrolling, let me text someone, let me reach out to someone. So it sounds like that's what you're saying is not to get lost in the just because I see someone on social media, does that really mean I've really connected or I really know what's going on?
Absolutely. I mean, even now, instead of texting, I try to send more voice messages if I'm
Mm,
talking with people. I think it's imperative because a lot of times the intonation of how we speak or
right.
what direction we're going with, you could say a
Yeah.
word, you could say a
Yeah.
word and it can mean 40 or 50 different things sometimes, right? And I
Yeah.
won't say that word that comes the first thing that comes to my mind, but there are words that we
Yeah.
could say that maybe go in a lot of different directions, and it could be interpreted in a lot of different directions.
Yes.
It's very, very, very complicated because we all communicate, but we're not all great communicators. And that's
Yeah.
me included. I work on that every day to figure out how can I communicate more effectively
Yeah.
because we all do it. But all of a sudden I had somebody on my team messaging me a couple of days ago. And it was a 3-word message. But what they forgot to tell me is what they were thinking in their mind that kind of led us to that. So, it's easy to kind of get lost and say, like, hey, wait, can you put the
Yeah.
context again? But I mean, I've been in a lot of, I mean, just confrontations with people or arguments for no real reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually something I see a lot in coaching conversations is that really the secret to a lot of the issues that I see or all the things that come up in coaching is that communicating better. It's all because of communication. We're assuming what the other person's thinking. We're thinking they know our position, they know what we're thinking. A lot of things really come back to that communication piece and the connecting piece. You mentioned relationship building and how that's something that you work on, that you focus on. Connection seems to be a top value for you. You have such an interesting story with, you said the 92 jobs. You've worked at some really cool places. How do you think that relationship building, you like worked at Noma in Copenhagen, places that are just known worldwide. And so, how did the relationship building, how did you get into Noma, right? Like, is it relationship building or how? I imagine it is. I don't know what, tell me a little bit more of that. I'm just curious. I think the audience will be too.
So the first thing that I would say, and I got a million things running through my head right now, but the first thing that I would say is the best education that I've ever had in my life was traveling. And the second were the streets. And third was when I went to that business school in Rome, but it was for the people and the relationships that I was around and what that led me to and how it changed
Mm,
the way that I would think, right? It wasn't
mm,
the actual material. So, that's extremely important to just as a little caveat to keep on the side. Now, whatever, I'll rewind to what Noma was. At one point, I was married. We were living in Rome. Things weren't working out with our situation there. This was, I think, my second tour duty in Rome. And basically, we went out. We had very little amount of money. I think it was like 287 euros, something like that to our name. We went out. We ordered 2 glasses of Amarone. I asked my ex, I said, do you have a coin? Yes, I do. We had 2 options. It was one was London, B was, or tails was Copenhagen. We went, I said, best 3 out of 5. We went to 4 wine bars. London won the first one. Copenhagen won the next 3. We moved to Copenhagen.
what? It was decided on a flip of a
It
coin.
was, yes, I mean, we let fate take us. And we spent almost
Wow.
2 years there in Denmark. And, eventually trying to fight to put a restaurant together. That's a question that everyone always asks me. Don't you want to have a restaurant? I said, we got to the goal line, or I got to the goal line in a couple places in the world, and it didn't work out. And it was okay. But anyway, I walked in, less than 24 hours there, snow up to my shins. And I'm going around and I don't have the gear and I'm going around. This is, I hate to say it was like 2005, something around there. Noma was just starting out. And I walked in and I said, it was like in between lunch and dinner. And I said, hi. And they just, everybody just kind of looked at me and I'm like,
Who is
And I
this guy?
think, who is this guy coming in between? I'm like, can I speak to the manager? And the answer was kind of like, I'm sorry, but we're booked for the next, 4 months or something. It was something along the lines of that. And I came back and I'm like, I'm not here for a reservation. I'm here for a job. And, I got like a stage job. And, they weren't the best restaurant in the world at the time. They were just a restaurant that had a lot of promise and a lot of potential. And I was in a new part of the world. And I said, hey, let's go try to learn what's happening in this part of the world and see what's going on. And then I walked up to the street. I had a top three, and the first one was like extremely, there was no way I would have been able to go there because it was very Danish. I didn't speak Danish. And then so I go to the third one, which was the Italian restaurant, and I sat down and we must have had 3 espressos. And the guy at the end of the day was like, and he offered me the job. And at the end of the day, he's like, but where in Sicily are you from? And I'm like, I'm not from Sicily, I'm from Chicago, but I'm from Italy, and my accent was what it was. And of course, he probably thought, with my eyes and everything, that I was probably from Sicily. I don't know. I don't really know Sicilian dialect, but anyway, that was the story. But all of those little pieces just help also get through it. I mean, you say 92 jobs. Yes, I say in 9 countries. There was a lot, from there we moved to the south of France and we worked for multi-billionaires on their mega yachts and their planes and their villas, etc. And that was really special too. I mean, you get to see things that, most
Yeah.
like 99.9
9999.
people would never see. And I was very fortunate to have that. I never pulled the lever and got 777. I never, got what I would call the perfect family for me. And so, I just continued. I guess you kind of know what you like and what you don't like, right? And I kind of knew what I was looking for, or maybe what I wasn't looking for. And I just never had really found that. And so, but anyway, it led me to some great experiences. That was about 3 years too in that part of the world. And I could go on and on, but
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really cool. Well, and it sounds like you're really curious, really open, right? You said fate led us there.
it was one of those things. I'll never forget it. About a little over a week, and we moved out of my friend Fabrizio's apartment. He was very happy because later I found out he was living at his family's home, sleeping on the floor for us.
Oh no.
I mean, an angel on top of an angel. And so as we left and we moved, there we are, and we're flying in, and we go, and it was in February, and it was kind of like a sunny, beautiful day in Rome. And then we start to drop into Scandinavia, and it's like that, the clouds get darker and darker and darker and darker. And I just remember looking at her and grabbed her hand, and I said, look, if it doesn't work out, we could leave. Like, we did this on a coin flip, anything, anything can happen. But let's see where it leads us. And it led us to some amazing experiences, some beautiful friends, some great relationships, and some stories that will be with me for my whole life.
I just think I just want to listen to you talk about like all of the cool things you probably have seen and experienced from different like cultures and countries. I didn't grow up with very much. And so I didn't really travel anywhere. We went to Mexico, where my parents were from. And I got on a plane for the first time when I was 17 or 18. And so the thought of just exploring the world to me sounds so cool. So I just think it's really cool what you've done and had the opportunity to experience.
Yeah, I've been extremely lucky, but what helped me tremendously was just me being open to it. A lot of times I didn't know what was going to happen right around the corner. And so I just kind of let things roll. And certainly, again, go back to the 92 jobs along the way. I knew what didn't work. And I know I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I worked in places for weeks and months, but I also worked in places for years. So when I found the right fit, I was always loyal. It was just finding what that right fit was. And in regards to moving and changing, there were circumstances that always made me make those decisions about what meant for the next step. I mean, certainly I'm very happy to call Chicago my home base and my home. With the digital series, we're in 20 cities roughly in the world a year filming. And we're really, of course, after coming off of the global health crisis, really ramping that up. And of course, we want people to live vicariously and to feel that. So we want to highlight that part of the world. We want people to get excited about that. We want people to say, Mexico City is more than just this really large city, but it's bustling with great gastronomy and art and
Mhm.
fashion and just the whole beauty behind it and how that should be taken in. And that's the same thing for everywhere. Our next stops, Israel and what that's like. And Israel's
Mm.
fantastic. Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, we'll be in Milan, Rome. We'll go through Emilia Romagna, which is like the breadbasket of Italy. We're in Barranquilla and in Medellin in Colombia. We might be zipping into Prague. And then there's 2023, and there's a lot of data. There's a lot. So I'm excited too. I'm excited to go back and revisit some of the places that are close to me or that I've spent parts of my life in, and also be able to highlight them and highlight the stories of other people, and hopefully not just highlight their stories and really engage those audiences to
Mm.
really feel the passion and the love for what it is, and
Mm.
understand really what that kind of like backstreet vibe is like. Because
Mm.
this is what we want. We want to know really what's going on in the city. We could always pick up a guide, or I mean, heck, most of the time you walk these cities, you're going to find the monuments and stuff anyway. But it's the people that really make the difference. Like I
Mm.
spent a lot of my time in Brazil and outside of Rio, and it's beautiful. But I've been to a lot of beautiful places in the world. But
Mm.
what's the difference is it's the heart and soul, the alma, the soul of the people
Mm.
that really resonates with me as a person and as an entrepreneur, as a traveler, as an explorer, and then really as a person who turns that around and who helps people understand what that looks like and means.
Mm. That's so inspiring. I love the people connection. This is what I enjoy doing the podcast, getting to connect with such interesting people. And I think what you just said and how you said it is going to resonate with people, right? The thought of, okay, I'm going to a new place. How can I connect with the people that are there? Not just go and be a tourist and of course do the things and see the monuments and all the things, but also connect with people, get to know people. And that's a different experience.
It's really interesting because there are a lot of places in the world. I think Mexico wants to say it or it says it, definitely Brazil, Turkey. There are just so too many to name that really the people are just so hospitable. I mean, you literally might meet somebody on the streets and you might be eating at their home in the evening. And that's such a great thing to be able to break bread with people and really just feel that exchange of energy, that
Mm.
exchange of love, how people are proud to show what that's about and just embrace that, because
Mm.
that's something that's extremely, extremely important. It's something that we become more and more detached with, I
Mm.
think. And it's something that I really love to highlight because I think
Mm.
these parts of the world, certainly how we go out and we kind of like vet where we're going to be going
Yeah.
and make those decisions, because God, I mean, there's 191 countries or something like that in the world. And there are a lot of great cities and there are a lot of great people. And how do we get to everything and do everything that we want to do and, create that magic and create it, make it dynamic for the audience? Because it's
Mm.
not about me. I'm one person. It's about the audience and how the audience is going to interact with that, how the audience is going to embrace that, what that's going to look, how are they going to travel there, what's the perspective as they travel, what's a traveler's perspective today opposed to, I don't even know, a couple weeks, couple months, a
Mm.
year or so from now? How will that change? And
Mm.
you see a lot of people traveling gastronomy tourism, gastro tourism, or art tourism. And especially if you're in places like Dallas or Chicago, or you have a major airport close to you, boom, you're 3 hours away, you're in a whole nother world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible to think about. Well, I hear your passion as you're talking about stories, about connecting. It's obvious to me that you enjoy, you love You're not doing this just because you feel like you should do it. You want to do it. You want to explore. You want to highlight stories. You want to connect. You love
It's
food.
it's hard to align that. And first off, you've got to recognize it. And
Mm.
secondly, you've got to understand what that means.
Mm.
And understanding, like, I understand what it means. I've got to also understand how to monetize off of it,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah,
if
for
I
sure.
can't, I mean,
For
there are
sure.
dreams where I'm going to end up stranded somewhere in the world without money, which has happened before, actually. But I mean, I think that kind of figuring out what your blueprint is. A lot of people get just kind of like backed up into situations where maybe they don't know why they're doing what they're doing, and yet they have passions to do other things. And trust me, I mean, even as a chef, I mean, think about New York has 13,000 restaurants. I mean, like cut that in half, 6,500. So you keep breaking everything down, and like at that high level, how do you get there? How do you monetize? What does it mean? But then again, with social media, there's so many great ways that people are dynamic and they do speak to a demographic, and their voice is something special. And with these new outlets and ways to create digital assets on these different platforms, even if it's just a small community, maybe it's a couple thousand people, you could still probably figure out a way to do something really cool where those people are listening to what you're doing, no matter what it is, whatever it's around.
I love that you mentioned the monetized piece. The part of the reason that I called this podcast Paid Vocation is because I really believe in the thought of getting paid to do something we enjoy, finding a way to make it work. So you love all of those things and you're actively trying to figure out, okay, how do I monetize this so I can keep doing these things?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would say, and I always tell people this, and I have to work hard on everything because, like I said, it's always work. But it's not doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, especially when you're doing something that you're passionate about or that you love, or you just know that it's going to take you to that wherever those next steps are, or you're following along to get to that purpose. But the mentorship is extremely important, and finding people who have answers, who can help guide you and help you get there. And it's not going to come from one person, it'll come from several. If you look at a company, they're going to have a board, or they'll have an advisory board, they'll have a junior advisory board. And a lot of times, all those different people come together because they have different ideas from different areas of expertise, or something very valuable to add. And that value add helps whatever that project or endeavor prosper. So that's the same thing. Think of yourself that way. We should all not just find the mentors to be able to help us grow and do the amazing things on this planet, but also you should be a mentor, right? You should be mentoring others, right? Mentee, mentor, and what does that look like? And it's great. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's something that you should embrace. It's fun. And you would be surprised how many people can get you there. And don't expect, you might say, well, that person's my mentor. Maybe you outgrow what that mentor's capacity is, but you move to that next step and you met along the way who can actually take you to the next level.
I love that you shared finding a mentor, but also how can I be a mentor, right? So always thinking about both.
I think that the richest person in the world and the poorest person in the world have so much to offer and so much to learn, and everything in between. So.
Yeah. I once heard someone say, have mentors that are older than you and have mentors that are younger than you, because we learn from everyone. I also heard you say earlier that you didn't know what was going to happen and you stayed open. What I've seen in client conversations is that a lot of times when there's pivots that clients are wanting to do, career changes, the thought of not knowing is what scares people. It's what paralyzes people.
Fear cripples us. And a lot of people are programmed or structured in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways is obviously saying you must have all of these things figured out before you can actually go out there. Like you need to have 6 months of savings or else just don't do it. And you should have 6 months of savings. But, if you don't, maybe you should do it anyway and figure out what, and just try to make it with what you have. Instead of have this safety net. Listen, I didn't have a lot of safety nets. I didn't grow up with safety nets. Below me wasn't a safety net. It was jagged glass. That was kind of like my safety net, like don't fall because there's jagged glass down there and it's not going to feel good. Opposed to you fall, but you got a safety net, so you're lucky. You fall, you got a rich uncle, so you're falling, your parents or somebody along the lines can, and you're lucky. But what about going out there and pushing yourself to focus so much that you don't fall or that you minimize the fall? And so it takes a lot because you give up a lot. It's scary, but I never looked at it as necessarily directly scary, being scared of it. I just looked at it as it was a challenge. And it was, I obviously knew that I wanted to get to that next level. And I knew that I was committed. I was committed mentally. I was committed physically, spiritually, emotionally. And I'm like, whatever, I'm going to make this happen. I was, being resourceful with those relationships you meet along the way and you develop and you grow, being resourceful and not just taking. Keep in mind that one of the biggest things you need to do is you need to be giving, giving. That's extremely important. No matter what level you reach. I know somebody that we did something with recently and we needed their assistance and they just didn't feel like they felt like that they were at a point in their career that they shouldn't necessarily have to be there and give because they'd already given everything that they needed to give to get to where they're at. So they shouldn't give anymore. And I don't think that that's true. I'm always giving. In fact, I'm giving tonight, but I'm giving to somebody who gave to me and they are and I mean, and I didn't, it wasn't like, hey, you gave to me, so I'm going to give back to you. It was like, I genuinely said, when you're in Chicago, it would be my honor to be able to give back to you because you helped me during a very challenging time in my life.
Yeah. And you're giving today to the audience today.
The gift that keeps on giving, keep on over and over. And it's true because I think that you can't tell a person once anymore. Like we need to be constantly be told things, over and over. And I'll use an olive oil, I use this olive oil, Garcia de la Cruz, organic. I love it. I'm always, using it. And I'll get somebody out of nowhere who always watches my stuff on Instagram and they'll come to me and say, Chef, in a DM, Chef, what olive oil do you like? Garcia de la Cruz. I mean, for me, they're a great brand. And I think it's extremely important putting myself behind brands that I believe in. They're also a great value for the quality and they're organic. So it falls in line with who I am, what my brand is and what I believe in. And so that's extremely important for me.
Yeah. We could hear things over and over, but the way someone says it, sometimes it just, or at the time that the person says it, it can click for us. Like maybe we weren't ready for it. And when we hear Charles say it, and then 100%. Now I'm ready. And 100%. Now it resonates.
There is so much out there in, let's call it the social media world. I mean, I even try not to get caught in that trap of watching Instagram story after story. I mean, like turn around and it's like, dang, it's been an hour. Not like I don't have 1,000,001 things to do. 5 in the morning. So I need to put the brakes on, but understanding, there's things that just come out there and it's like the right timing. And sometimes they're like, oh, that's too good for me right now. Or and that's just the truth. There's no rhyme or reason to that. But I do believe that there's a time where you're just looking for that. Or maybe it's something you need to hear. Or maybe it's something that's just going to resonate more with you at that moment.
Yeah. I tell clients that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so when we're ready to learn, we're ready to take it in and we meet someone, we hear about a book, we listen to a podcast. Well, Charles, I am so grateful for you having spent time with us today, sharing your story. It's so generous. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to close with? If there's someone sitting at their desk right now, listening to this podcast saying, I don't necessarily love what I do. What do you want to say to that person listening?
Well, first thing I'll say, this is one of hopefully many. Number two, you could always reach out to me. We could always have a side chat.
Oh my God, thank you.
We never have a problem with that. I think that the first thing you need to do is you need to get yourself in the right space. And the way to do that is you need to take yourself steps back and just, whether it's a full day and wherever it is, and just clear your head. And what took me after 92, this is important. After 92, there would have been a 93. And I wasn't sure what that looked like. And a friend of mine told me, she said, Charles, you can take your knives and you can go work for an international hotel chain and go back working internationally, or you could take your knives and go back and work in like the south of Côte d'Azur, back in the south of France. And I'm sure you'll find a lot of great families who would love to hire you. Or you could take that and take the business acumen and what you've learned along the way, combine them. And she said, basically create a chalkboard wall, which is what I did, and put up there exactly what you want. And I said, all right, let's see what this is about. So I went over there, went to the store and I got the paint and I painted it up there and I got this cool chalk and I'm just looking at it. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And I just started putting things all up there that I wanted. And the interesting thing about it was, as I started to connect one dot to the other, to the other dot to the other, I found that I was a heck of a lot closer than what I thought in my mind that I was to achieve what I thought was going to be cool. And then what I realized was the 2 or 3 dots that didn't connect, no matter the size of them, I just had to figure out how to achieve them. And so that made it easy. So I think that that's something that's extremely important. Visualization is something that I also like to tell people, and I really focus a lot on, especially like when I'm doing events and stuff. I've got to visualize, and I love people. I think, Chicago, right? I'm from Chicago, and arguably again, I like to say that, arguably one of the best basketball players ever, Michael Jordan. Guys, don't hate me if you're out there. In that conversation. But listen, one thing that's extremely important, whether it was Kobe or Michael or, LeBron, you've got to put your mind in the right place. And what these guys did, it wasn't about their athletic skill and training. It was training their minds. They visualized obstacles. They visualized how to go around obstacles and how to be better. And this is something that I'm really focusing on right now. So here's a book that was gifted to me, and I'm going to try to put that in the front. Tim Grover, Relentless. And it says, From Good to Great to Unstoppable. And it's about mental toughness, but it's so much more than that. I think that those people that are at the desk and they really bring it back. And when you're, kind of conceptualizing, where do I go? How do I do? Oh, it sounds easy. Or I don't know if I can take 92 jobs or blah, 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 blah. Journey of a Million Miles starts with one step. And that one step is clearing your head, maybe making that chalkboard wall, figuring out what that means and how to incorporate some of these. There's a lot of great books out there you could get. I mean, I've got probably about 80 books that I want to read right now. And I probably will read like 1 or 2. But, and that's the reality. Again, that's the reality. Yeah. But, figuring out how to take those first steps, how to take the first steps is where it's at.
Ah, I love that. Thank you, Charles. So if someone's listening and wants to follow along or work with you, tell us all the things.
Yeah. I mean, the jazz. Hashtag Chef on Tour is the name of the digital series, but at Chef Charles Webb, 2 B's at the end. That's where you find me on Instagram. We're building a whole new YouTube channel. That was my whole morning today working on that. The ecosystem will grow. We'll be on Twitch eventually and go strong. We'll be on TikTok, wherever we could, really drive impact and engagement and just get people excited about all of those things. Remember, it's never direct. A lot of it is indirect. It's just all of those pieces together. But yeah, or you could just, there's Google Chef Charles Webb. There's always a lot of content out there. I try to keep everything the same. So that's the same for the website, but start over in the IG. I think that's where I hang out the most,
Yeah, me too.
I can't be everywhere, guys. Come on.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So special. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.